Here, and I'm excited about it. Last week we had Mike on, the golf card collector. Check out Fondling Cardboard, his podcast. We talked about the Masters, talked about golf cards, something that I didn't know anything about, but when I dig in, it's really interesting, fascinating. And the thing that stood out for me was that there are golf cards that are older than the test of time. Pre-war is just as old as some of the baseball cards, which is insanity. So I like emerging categories. I like segments of the hobby that don't get a ton of attention. And I think golf cards are super fun. I'm not saying I'm going out here and starting to collect golf cards, but I think getting educated on spaces that don't get the spotlight often is super fun. And that is something I'm passionate about sharing. And what we are doing.
Ridiculous fondling cardboard.
What is up? Welcome back to Fondling Cardboard. I'm your host, Mike Lakusta, aka the Golf Card Collector. That intro was courtesy of Brett McGrath from the Stacking Slabs podcast. And this most recent episode, he broke down his collecting lanes and how he thinks about them. And one thing he said that really resonated with me was some people think when their sports team isn't doing well, that it's time to kind of hang up the reins for a little bit with collecting them, to slow down a little bit. But he has the opposite reaction. He goes all in. And I was reflecting on that because during the Masters week, I got some really bad news. The Phoenix Coyotes, or the Arizona Coyotes, but I'm going to call them Phoenix Coyotes now because they're not really a team anymore, because they are being relocated to Utah, to Salt Lake City, and honestly, it was devastating to hear that. I'm not going to talk much about it today. I'm still processing, but what he said there made me think, what does a collector do? How should I feel when I'm losing my team? I mean, there are some, I wouldn't call them a light at the end of the tunnel, but there's some sparks of hope for the distant future. But currently, right now, what does it mean for my collection? And what does it mean for buying more of their cards? So I look forward to breaking that down another day once I've processed a bit more. So be sure to check out that episode with myself and Brett on Stacky Slabs. That was from last Friday. And yeah, check out all of his other stuff because he has a fantastic podcast about collecting sports cards. And as you could tell by my voice, the Lakusta household is sick again. Those toddler germs, preschools, they will get you. So shout out to you parents out there, you fathers, you mothers. I'm sure a lot of you know what I'm talking about. I've got a friend out there who's listening who will be joining the club soon enough, so good luck to you, sir. But maybe I'll just call this my Masters hangover because I was definitely working hard, watching some Masters, balancing that with family as well as the pools I was running and the contests. And yeah, that was a lot of fun. So those of you who won prizes for my giveaways, thanks for your patience. I haven't had a chance to get to it between work and everything, but I'll definitely be shipping stuff out within the next few days. But today we've got an awesome interview with my friend Paul from the Sports Card Strategy Show, and we met the week before Masters Week to hash out the wrinkles of the Collector versus Investor series that we collaborated on a few months ago. And if you're new to the feed, it's by no means a prerequisite to have listened to those episodes. If you find yourself curious about what the Collector versus Investor series was all about, you can rewind into the Fondling Cardboard archives to check out that series. And you'll notice I don't have that sick voice in the interview, so you'll only have to handle this for a few more seconds here. But we talk about, is it important to understand why each of us collects cards, reducing waste in our lives and in the world? Why do base cards exist? And why are there so many cards in the hobby? We speculate on Scottie Scheffler's reasons for not having sports cards. And by the way, this was recorded before Scottie won the 2024 Masters, so he's even more dominant now. And we talk about what is the future of Sports Illustrated for Kids, or actually just the Sports Illustrated brand. And will Sports Illustrated for Kids cards die out? And what does that mean for future generations when they look back on them? We also talk a bit about collectors as investors and who's actually better at flipping cards, which I found kind of funny. And you'll notice there's this theme throughout our conversation that Paul and I are friends. We have big differences in the way we think, and we're just trying to hash things out in a civil, professional way, and I think you guys will enjoy. So here we go.
What is up, Paul? How you doing, man?
What's up, Mike? I'm great because I always love talking to you, man.
Right on. Well, hopefully you say that at the end of the conversation too, because I think you and I want to continue challenging each other. And one of the topics that you've brought up a lot recently is the concept of why do collectors collect sports cards? And I was initially on board. I love self-reflection. I love digging deep, understanding why I do the things I do. And at the end of the day, maybe I do have an impulsive kind of personality type. And if there's something that can keep me back from just hitting buy it now on anything I see on eBay, I'm all for it. I'm for self-restraint or setting constraints on my collecting. However, I was talking with a friend recently and I dropped your name and I said, Paul is really pushing collectors to understand why we collect. And he kind of shrugged. And this is a guy who's been collecting cards for longer than I've been alive. So 40 years he's been collecting. And he said, what does it matter? What does it matter why I collect? I've always collected and I just love cards. So before I start poking you a bit in this subject, what's your response to that?
One thing, first of all, I want to say is that if people out there know that their why is just because they like to collect cards, then who am I to challenge that, right? Like, that's totally fine. I think where I like to make people think and challenge them a little bit is I see a lot of excess, not only in the hobby, but in the world, right? I see, especially in North America, I see a lot of waste, a lot of people over consuming things, over consumption. I've become a bit of a minimalist as I got into my 30s and now I'm in my 40s. I became a bit of a minimalist when my kids probably hit age, 5, 6, 7. My wife and I looked around the house and we're like, why do we have all these toys? Like, why did we allow everyone in our world to buy our kids so many toys? And of course, we're fortunate enough to be in a position where, we have friends and family who can buy us stuff with their disposable income, right? I think that's pretty common in middle America, right? So I kind of, my wife and I went through this phase in 2018 where we basically became minimalists, got rid of everything that we owned. We sold our house, we sold our cars, and we moved to Spain. And we lived in Spain for 5 years with our kids in a less than 800 square foot apartment. As our kids reached preteen and even teenage years, we were still in that same apartment with really like not that many clothes, not that many belongings. We didn't have any form of transportation other than walking places and occasionally taking taxis and things like that. And we lived that lifestyle for 5 years. And during those 5 years, I started back up in the hobby big time, collecting cards at first, and then realizing that I didn't really want to collect cards. It didn't go with my minimalism, because what am I going to do with all these cards? Like, they're just going to sit around. I don't have space for this. And so I became really fond of the sports card market and the prices and how you can flip cards to make money. And so I found my passion in the hobby was more using my brain in that regard to move cards and transact with people. And so I really started to think, like, why do people want to keep all of these cards? Like, why would you want to rip a box and get that? I get the instant thrill that somebody would get from ripping wax, but when I tried it myself, I felt gross about the excess product just sitting around that I didn't want, like, time and time again. And so my point of view in 2023 and into 2024 really changed based on my experience in the hobby. My experience was, okay, I'm going to collect first. I'm going to rip wax. I'm going to try everything. I'm going to buy a bunch of singles. I'm going to see how this goes. I'm going to participate in breaks. I did that all through 2021, part of 2020, part of 2022. I felt gross about it personally. I felt like, why is there all this excess stuff? Why is there all these cards sitting around that now literally nobody wants these cards? Like, nobody wants 90% of these cards. 10% are collectors are really fond of and flippers are really fond of, and there's value behind them, but there's just so much excess stuff. And so that's really what got me thinking, look, I don't want to challenge people individually as to why they collect, but I want to ask the question, if you are doing this, why are you doing it? And what are you doing with these cards? If you're going out and spending, say, $500 on a card to add to your PC for a particular player or a particular team, what's the end goal with that? Is it's going to sit around? Are you going to display it? Is it going to make you feel good? I personally, that doesn't resonate with me. There's people that value experiences over things. There's people that value things over experiences. I don't fault any collectors out there for what they do in terms of how it makes them feel. I just kind of want to open up the dialogue with people like you. I'll drop Iowa Dave's name because I've been on his podcast talking about something very similar to this. And I like talking talking with him about it. And I think that when we can open up the dialogue between, say, investors, flippers, and more collectors, PCers, and talk about these things, I always enjoy it. I know you enjoy it too. Hopefully the audience does. And I don't want to come across like mad at collectors or that I don't understand collectors. I just want to, on a person by person basis, I'm curious to know, like, what is your goal? Like, is your goal to have every Steve Nash card in the world? Is your goal to have only a certain subset of Steve Nash cards? And I'll stop on this one, Mike, and I'll pass it back over to you. But I think where this really comes from me, because I've been married for almost 20 years and I love my wife, like we have an amazing relationship. I think about, what if my wife walked into my office and said, and she's super supportive of everything I do, so this wouldn't be like a fight, but I think about, what if she walked into my office and she said, holy crap, you've got $5,000 worth of Magic Johnson cards in here. I wanted to take a vacation 2 years ago and you told me we didn't have the money, WTF, right? So I think about those kinds of things when I make my decisions. I think about my kids' college accounts. I think about all sorts of things, right? I think about paying the bills probably more than anything. And I have a team at nooffseason.com, lucky enough to have a team and pay some salaries. So it's like, I think about, am I going to hold this Grail card when I could be paying this person's salary? And I don't want to be nervous about taking, my wife out to a nice dinner because of the cost. So I think I'm coming at it from a standpoint of like, look, great. If you want to spend your disposable income, your hard-earned money on something that makes you feel happy, and that's a card, phenomenal. I love that. I wouldn't be able to do what I do without that, right? Like, let's be honest. I know that, but I'm just curious, like, what are you guys doing? What are you PCers doing? What are you collectors doing? That's all.
There's a lot to unpack there, Paul. When I first asked the question, my mindset was I was going to start poking you and saying, there's a stigma in the collecting circles against collectors, flippers, and feeling like they're sort of taking advantage of this passion that people have for the hobby. People are willing to spend tens, hundreds, thousands of dollars on what we consider, let's say, artwork or collectibles, and kind of taking advantage of that passion to make money. And I was originally going to frame this as, hey, Paul, is this your way of pushing back? Is this your way of trying to turn the table and say, hey, collectors, this is my objective. This is why I'm doing it. Why don't you look at yourself in the mirror and question yourself? Why are you collecting? And I thought maybe there was a bit of resentment in it. But when you explained that you came from this minimalist lifestyle, I start to understand why on a personal level, you don't understand the collector's journey, the hoarder personality type, as you've accused people of in the past. I don't think you've accused anybody specifically, but you've thrown the word around there. So it could just come down to the fact you don't have that collector bone. Because when I look at the collector journey, it starts out with loving those low-end base cards, just the fodder that you alluded to, the stuff that people just want to throw away, the stuff that when your mindset is reducing waste in the world and consumption of stuff that's wasteful, I can understand your philosophy of saying, well, why does it even exist? But there's kids, there's adults who loved collecting base cards and things like that growing up and in our past. And, there's so many reasons to have base cards that, I don't think that the hobby would exist without them, but I can understand why someone like you would think it's a waste. The high-end cards that we love buying and selling, they wouldn't be rare if there wasn't millions of less rare base cards. The whole aspect of ripping and enjoying the gambling aspect, let's say, that wouldn't exist without base cards. Maybe some would say that would be a good thing. Maybe some people would say maybe we just need the nice artwork in higher end cards. So no, you shared a lot that's helping me understand your perspective. I think the next place I want to go with this is looking at a golfer that you and I have talked about in the past, Scottie Scheffler. And I was planning on talking more card related, but you've got my mind working in a philosophy mode. Scottie Scheffler is not in any 2024 Upper Deck golf products. If they had him, the product would have been an order of magnitude bigger because he's the number one golfer in the world. People are comparing him to the beginning of Tiger Woods' career. He's on fire. I saw a list of stats on Instagram, and these were not insignificant stats. It was like green in regulation, scoring average, like the big stats. There's like 15 of them. Scottie Scheffler was number one in every category. So this guy is the next thing, and he doesn't have trading cards. So I've been asking my friends, I've even asked Upper Deck, what happened? Why is it? I mean, I know it has to do with the fact that they couldn't get him to sign a contract because every golfer on the PGA is an individual contractor who has to sell their name, image, and likeness individually. But why? Why is Scottie not giving it? And I don't have answers. It could be personal, could be financial, but where you were going with your philosophy had me wondering, is Scottie Scheffler, does he maybe have a similar minimalist mindset, and he doesn't believe in the hobby, and he doesn't want to produce waste with his name on it? Or if not, maybe if it was personal, he's a very religious guy, and maybe there's some kind of religious aspect if he were to be against trading cards. I don't know what religion would have against collectibles, but I do know one Bible verse, which I had to look up. I don't know it by offhand. Matthew 6:19-21, and it's, "Do not store up for yourself treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourself treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, where thieves do not break in and steal. For your treasure is, there your heart will also be." And it made me wonder, is there this spiritual religious mindset that doesn't go hand in hand with trading cards? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, and I am a bit philosophical from time to time. I think with Scottie, my hot take is that, and this comes from nothing that I know about Scottie Scheffler, but what I do know about professional athletes and entrepreneurs, is that those that are the most successful allow themselves to be hyper focused on one particular thing. And the outside world kind of sees that like to a fault. But the reason why you have Michael Jordan, LeBron James, you have Tiger Woods, and Scottie Scheffler potentially is because, they've all in certain points in their careers been so hyper focused around their craft. And from time to time, professional athletes allow themselves to dabble in other things or get distracted in other things. Shaquille O'Neal's a good example. He's done a lot in his career. Throughout his career, he's always done multiple things, and he's been he's successful on the basketball court. But there's some people that prefer to be just hyper focused on their craft, and they're okay spending their time only doing that and only making money doing that, and not using that celebrity to make additional money. And I've just seen that a lot in professional sports personally. I've seen a lot of professional athletes that I've worked with personally that have no interest in media interviews. They have no interest in any kind of endorsements that require additional time, because what they want to do is they want to spend their time honing their craft and then spending it doing other things that they love to do. So I don't know about Scottie Scheffler in particular, but I do know firsthand a lot of professional athletes and a lot of entrepreneurs who are successful, and they share that one trait, right? And so that's my hot take on maybe why somebody like Scottie Scheffler would not sign a contract, to make additional money through Upper Deck. One thing I will say though, just bringing it back to cards a little bit more, is that with Scottie Scheffler's 2017 SIFK Kids cards, one thing I like about being a sports card investor, is I look for opportunities all the time. So I know there's probably a lot of people, I'll just sidebar real quick and then get back to that card. I know there's probably a lot of people out there that look at me and do think I'm taking advantage of people who collect. I wholeheartedly do not believe that. I participate in the hobby in a lot of different ways and I try to support everybody in the hobby as much as possible, from, doing all the things that collectors do. I feel like I'm doing those things. I'm just not holding the cards long term. So I'm supporting breakers. I'm supporting the youth of the hobby. I'm supporting card shows, card shops, other sellers, and transacting a lot and not always trying to be the top comp, right? Leaving meat on the bone, things like that. Moving cards to people who love the cards without trying to always get the top dollar. So I don't feel bad about anything I do in the hobby, even though there might be that perception from people who don't like flippers or don't like investors. But I will say this, one other reason why I love doing what I'm doing is because it's true to me. So what's true to me is I enjoy the thrill of being sort of my own fantasy general manager. And sports cards allows me to take it a level above fantasy sports. In fantasy sports, you're either right or wrong in a particular weekend or a particular season. Thing I like about sports cards is you've got the card, you've got the asset. So if you're not right on a particular weekend, if Scottie Scheffler doesn't win the Masters, and I bought his 2017 SIFK Kids PSA 5, if he doesn't win the Masters and that card doesn't go up, he's still Scottie Scheffler. I still have that card. I still could be right about him. So I like that aspect of it. And that's really the crux of why I do what I do. It's true to me to talk about that kind of thing and find those opportunities. I love finding the opportunities. And because he only really has that one investable card. There isn't Upper Deck cards, to your point. He's not in anything else. He has 2 Sports Illustrated for Kids cards. The 2017 one is the only one that's valuable because it's his rookie card. I like that because there's no competition for that card. So as a flipper investor, I know that's the card. That's the card to go to. And that's going to be the only real card that people want. That's not the only collectible for Scottie Scheffler out there. But if you're a golf card person or a sports card person who wants to buy a Scottie Scheffler card, that's going to be the card that you're going to want to buy. So as a flipper, I like to go out and try to get that card, for example, and put it into a condition where somebody would want to buy it for slightly more than what I bought it for, right? And so I get the enjoyment out of that more than I get the enjoyment out of having that Scottie Scheffler card, say, in a PSA 10, right? Because that would be the rarest of the rare Scottie Scheffler card right now, sitting on my desk for several years. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Sidebar before we get into the deeper conversation again, do you think Sports Illustrated for Kids is going to continue? Do you think that with Sports Illustrated, whatever drama's going on over there, do you think they'll continue making the kids magazine and printing those cards?
I don't know. That's a good question. I have to think that there's a good chance that it won't continue, only because, if you look at the history of that magazine, and I will say, like, I get nostalgia too. I get nostalgic, and I understand nostalgia and why that's such a big part of the hobby and a big part for collectors. Sports Illustrated for Kids is a magazine that I subscribed to when I was a kid. I feel like I was right at the age when, I was born in 1981. So you'd have to look up when that magazine came out. But I mean, I think I was right at the age of being like peak sports fan as a kid when that magazine came out. I read that magazine cover to cover like every month. But if you look at the history of that magazine, it's gone from like every month you could find it everywhere to now it's 6 issues a year, and you can barely find it anywhere in retail. You have to subscribe online to get that magazine. So I do, part of me does think it's going to go away. There's obviously, you alluded to, so the Arena Group, a lot of people will read a headline and they don't really understand what's going on. Arena Group filed for bankruptcy. They were the ones that owned the licensing to Sports Illustrated and all of the Sports Illustrated brands. So it's not that the brand doesn't exist anymore and that the brand went bankrupt. My understanding is that the brands have a new ownership group now. So that new ownership group is trying to figure out what to do with the brands, and that's why everything's up in the air. So yeah, I mean, it would be sad to see that magazine go away completely. I think there's a great element to the cards that come in the magazine. There's a similar element where you would rip a box or you would rip a pack trying to figure out what's in that pack. And I get that. I just don't like it as much as I like other things that are related to buying singles. The magazine, like, I get excited. I get the magazine and I want to see what cards are in the magazine, but I paid, $12 for 6 issues of the magazine. So I don't feel like crushed if I don't get anything good in the magazine. I feel like, okay, this is a magazine. I can read it. I can put it away. And yeah, that would be sad. I think it could go away, but I don't know. I hope that whoever owns the brands now find a way to keep that going.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I hate to see a legacy end. However, if you were to look at historical sets that hold huge esteem in the hobby from the past, like I'm talking tobacco cards, Sport King's chewing gum cards, those sorts of things, they all had to come to an end at some point. I actually don't know if they would be as iconic if they had continued on for more decades, for a century. So I do see Sports Illustrated for Kids as being one of those brands that is going to be huge after we die, 100 years from now, when our kids are elderly and they have some cards from our old collection. I think some Sports Illustrated for Kids cards could be the ones that they could retire off of, possibly.
So Mike, I want to interject here because you just made me think of something that I think is super relevant to everyone out there. I think most people would take our conversation in this direction. I think they would go, okay, so are you guys saying that I should keep a bunch of Scottie Scheffler SI for Kids cards, because then if Sports Illustrated for Kids does go away and Scottie Scheffler does become the next big thing in golf where he's a household name, Like, we know him, and probably everyone listening to this podcast knows him as like a top, like he's a superstar, right? But he's not a household name. And so, but I think that people listening to this show would think, oh, maybe this is an opportunity. And that's great. I love that about our audience. I love that about people. But I want to ask you, in my mind, because I don't like to try to be right about those things. I don't like to, this is the other thing about me not holding cards very long. I don't like to put myself in a position where I'm guessing that multiple things could happen. And then I'm waiting, holding that asset for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, because I think it goes along with what I talked about earlier. Like, if I could get $150 for my Scottie Scheffler 2017 PSA 5 now, I know what I'll do with that $150, and I'll be up $50 from where I bought it. And that makes me feel fulfilled as a human being. That makes me feel like I accomplished something. Like, somebody might look at that and go, oh, well, he's just about that $50. Okay, that's fine. But really what I'm about is like feeling fulfilled as a human being and like I accomplished something, which I think the person who bought the Scottie Scheffler card would feel the same way about having the card for whatever reason they bought the card. My question is, should people be thinking, like, prognosticating in the long term based on what you said on a card potentially going up in value based on a brand? Because I agree with you. I think if that brand goes away, I totally agree with you. I think like Sports Illustrated for Kids could be some generation's version of like the T206 tobacco cards, right? That very well could happen. Does that mean that there's additional value in the early Tiger Woods cards, the LeBron James cards, the Victor Wembanyama cards, the Scottie Scheffler cards? Like, does that mean people should go all in on the Sports Illustrated for Kids rookie cards? Or does that just mean that it's interesting to think about, but everybody pump the brakes? Because I know where my mind goes, but I'm just curious to where everyone else's mind goes.
Mm-hmm. Well, my mind goes into, I guess, two directions, and it all depends on what your role is in the hobby. Circling back to you justifying what you do in the hobby, I said I used to be a little resistant towards that approach. However, I've come to accept that it's okay for people to participate in different ways, because I can't participate in the hobby in every single way. I just do it the way that I enjoy, and you're in the exact same boat. And it's okay that you and I don't enjoy doing the same thing. If we were playing basketball, it's okay if you get to be the big man and you like dunking on people, and I like to be the point guard and dishing it out to you. It's okay for us to like to do different things. So I don't have that investor mindset. When I look at a card that I might want to hold on to for decades, I'm not thinking about it as a financial instrument. I'm not thinking about it as an investment. Maybe it's an investment, but it's an investment with utility value for me, the same way that my house has utility value. I would live in the card. I would treat it as artwork. It's hanging on my wall. If it depreciates, if it increases in value, so what? And so that's my approach. And so others like me, I would say, if you're trying to own that card because you want it, then have that investor mindset. When's the best time to get in on getting that card? If your goal is to sell it and you have a selling marker in mind, you have a time frame of ownership of that card, then I've got a couple, tidbits for your listeners. First, look at the era we're in. People are obsessed with sports cards. And as a result of that, the cards are well looked after. They're kept in pristine condition. They're graded the moment they are released. And so I feel like the superstars of today might not have a chance to become that next T206, because there's going to be a high population. These cards aren't getting fondled in school libraries like they were in 1996 when the Tiger Woods Sports Illustrated for Kids was first released. And so because that Tiger Woods card wasn't well looked after, sports card weren't, maybe they were booming, around then. That's when I guess PMG, Star Rubies, Upper Deck was hitting the scene. It was actually an amazing time for sports cards, but there wasn't this giant hobby. There was a much smaller group of people who were obsessed. Especially Sports Illustrated for Kids, were just treated like a kid's novelty. So I wonder if any current superstar has the chance to be that multi-decade long investment. Maybe there's a kid right now, some 6-year-old who's learning to golf or play basketball or whatever sport you want to talk about, who's going to be the superstar 20 years from now. And if the hobby has completely fallen into shambles at that point, maybe that's, and people aren't sorting, maybe everybody's resentful about the hobby and throwing things into dumpsters and dumping containers of sports cards into the ocean. Those are kind of the eras of athletes that I think have that chance to be a generational generational asset. So I might have just been mincing my words, messing around a little bit when I said
I like that.
my Scottie Scheffler Sports Illustrated for kid could help my kids retire. I'm just sort of joking.
Mike, do you mind if I take this in a different direction here? Because I feel like it's relevant to a few of the things that you've said. So I just want to ask you a quick question because it's been on my mind, and I think the listeners will appreciate it. So my experience has been like fully immersive in the hobby for the last 4 years. And what's interesting to me is people who identify as collectors and have any kind of pushback towards people who identify as flippers or investors. I think they're better flippers and better investors than the people who identify as flippers and investors. And I'll explain a few things what I mean specifically. I think the best flippers and investors, the people who make the most profit on transacting in sports cards they're keeping more cards than people that don't keep cards. And I think for that reason, I don't understand the pushback, because the way that I see things is that I see we're all doing the same things. Whether you identify as a flipper, an investor, a prospector, a collector, whoever, we're all trying to do the same thing. We're all doing the same things. We're all trying to buy a card at its low point and own it as it's going up and then determine what to do with it. And I think if you're a collector, you can't possibly be collecting everything, right? So, and in your collecting journey, you're picking up things that you don't want. And then you're moving those things for a profit to buy things that you do want. And so if I'm correct in any way, if I'm at any percentage correct in that statement, I would just challenge everybody to say, look, why would you be mad at anybody who wants to pay down their mortgage a little bit more, or pay their bills, or take their kid golfing with the money from a card flip? Why would you give that person any more pushback than you would give the person who would take that money and buy cards for their PC with it? And maybe I'm missing other aspects of why there would be pushback, but the way that I see it is that in my immersive experience over the last 4 years, and a lot has happened in the hobby in the last 4 years, I see we're all doing the same thing. We're all trying to do the same thing. The only difference between people who identify as investors or flippers and people who identify as collectors is how long they keep the cards for. And I also see really most people in the hobby, and I've asked a lot of questions and surveyed a lot of people and talked to a lot of people, say that I've talked to card shop owners, I've talked to content creators, card show hosts, vendors at card shows, audience members of mine. It seems like a bulk of the percentage of people in the hobby identify in some way, shape, or form as a flipper or an investor, even if they also PC. So you've used the word pushback a lot, or, a bit of a negative connotation to the approach. And so I just kind of want to say that I believe that everything is allowed, and I don't fault or challenge people for collecting. I just kind of want to understand, like, also why is there friction? Is that because there's people that have come into the hobby, done some things, and then left the hobby? Is it because certain people are just old school and they don't like change? And I'm asking these rhetorically, right? You don't have to answer these, but I kind of want to ask you the question, like, why were you personally, to try to use your own words, like, resistant to the approach? Because I've transacted with you and you flip to fund your PC.
Did I get you? Did I make some money off you? I know that's actually how we met. I don't know if you ended up making profit on it, but I certainly did.
No, the card that I bought from you, I sold for significantly less than what I bought it.
Sorry to hear that,
for
man.
From you. That's what I live with all the time. Like that's what I try to. So my approach is to, like, there's no apology necessary, because really the reason why I create the content I create is because I know that that's happening to people. I know that that's happening to my audience. I don't want them to leave the hobby. I think that based on my experience in the hobby coming in 2020, 2021, kind of as a newbie, the way that I was treated as a purchaser of sports cards, not from you, but the way that I was treated in general as someone trying to learn and trying to purchase sports cards did make me want to leave the hobby. And so part of the reason why I have the mission that I have right now to help people make money flipping sports cards is so they don't leave the hobby. Mm-hmm. So I think that I get taken aback sometimes when there's negative connotation to what I do. I don't really understand it.
Sorry, guys. That's where I cut the conversation. We actually talked for over an hour, so that was just half of the conversation. Hopefully, I left you on a cliffhanger because the next part is, I believe, where we really get into the meat and potatoes. Because I start off by talking about why I am predisposed against the investor flipper mentality. And next week, I'll be sharing the second half of that conversation. And let me tell you, it gets spicy. And I reveal a story that I had honestly never really thought about until that moment in our conversation. It came with some guilt. It came with some self-reflection. And honestly, I just feel like we're both getting to become better people and better hobbyists because of it. So I'm grateful to have a friend like Paul in the hobby who thinks completely opposite to me, but we can still get along. And we also talked about religion a little bit with regards to Scottie Scheffler, and I have no discrimination against any religions. In fact, the Rated Rabbi had an excellent interview with Jeremy Lee on Sports Card Live about 2 weeks ago, so check that one out. Honestly, that one was really thought-provoking, and one of these days when I get a few extra minutes, I honestly want to just do a deep dive into their conversation, maybe pull some clips for you guys, because, yeah, there's a lot to unpack in that one. Card of the week is the 1996 Sports Illustrated for Kids Tiger Woods SGC 3.5. I love this card. This was the second place prize in the Fondling Cardboard Masters pool. This card is incredible, as well as the first place prize, which was the Grand Slam Ventures Tiger Woods rookie card in SGC 9. And I just chose these as the card of the week last week and now this week because they are departing my collection, and I will miss them. I'm sure they're going to be going to some good homes. I know the person who's receiving this specific card, that would be Justin Lee, is an avid Tiger Woods collector, a great member of the Golf Cards and Memorabilia Facebook group. So Justin, congratulations on earning this card. You will be getting in the mail shortly. And these Sports Illustrated for Kids cards are funny because, like I said to Paul earlier, they get ripped out of children's magazines. They get fondled. They get pizza sauce all over them, whatever. And this one's for 3.5. It is in wonderful condition. The guy got it from also had a PSA 7. And when we compared the two, the SGC 3.5 to a PSA 7, the 3.5 looked cleaner. It just looked nicer. The only reason I got a 3.5 is in the bottom left corner, there's like some oil stain kind of on the surface. It's a pretty small stain. It's like someone had something on their finger when they ripped it out and it just kind of soaked into the pores of the card. So it's just darker. And honestly, it's like half an inch by maybe an eighth of an inch wide. So it's this tiny little sliver, but just because of the grading standards, SGC has to give it, a 3 because, of a surface stain quality. However, that's what these incremental, the 0.5, that's what those grades are for. Basically, what that means is that it had to get a 3 due to firm grading criteria, yet it is way better than a 3. So then they have to bump it up to a 3.5. And because of the core criteria, it wouldn't qualify for a 4 because of this particular stain. But everything else means, yeah, it's honestly deserving of like a 7 or an 8. So congratulations again, Justin. And one day I hope to get one of these Tiger Woods Sports Illustrated for Kids rookie cards again. Maybe someday. Thanks again, guys, for tuning in and for bearing with my ridiculous voice. I hope you guys have an awesome week. And tell a friend about the show, as Brett says on the Stacky Slabs. Tell a damn friend. And I look forward to seeing you guys next week.
Ridiculous golf card collector.